Coming up on Primetime News, a slightly reduced version of the extra budget bill passes Korea's National Assembly. Now the government gears up to pump the money where it's most needed. President Park Geun-hye meets with business leaders supporting the country's innovation centers and urges them to facilitate job creation for the younger generation. And Japan's Mitsubishi Materials extends an apology to Chinese victims of wartime slavery, but it's a deafening silence for Korea. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Friday, July 24th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you so much for joining us. After a 3-week wrangling between Korea's rival parties, the National Assembly today passed a revised version of the extra budget bill.
Now the focus shifts to when the money is going to be injected to the MERS-hit economy, and the government pledges to do that from early next month. Our Kim Young-gil tells us the details of the passed bill and more that's left for further talks.
The nearly $10 billion extra budget, a slightly reduced version from its original form, will help revive the country's growth momentum and deal with the fallout from MERS and droughts. The ruling Saenuri Party hailed the passage of the bill.
As rival parties promised, we were able to add significance to the day. We hope the budget will act as nutritional supplements for Korea's sluggish economy and improve the livelihoods of the people.
The additional funds will be used to make up for tax revenue shortfalls, allocate funds for social overhead capital, which will contribute to creating more jobs, and provide funds for small and medium-sized enterprises that have been hit by decreased domestic consumption. On the issue of raising corporate taxes, the rival parties agreed to continue discussions on the matter. However, the ruling bloc is still hesitant, saying it will first wait for the government's plan for managing the fiscal deficits. In regards to the National Intelligence Service hacking scandal, controversy still remains, but the two parties agreed to be briefed by the NIS at the National Assembly's Intelligence Committee.
Controversy remains over how to resolve the NIS hacking scandal. As part of a compromise, we decided to hold briefing and testifying sessions from the NIS at 4 parliamentary committees.
However, bipartisan discord may be reignited during the process of selecting witnesses for the briefings and the panel experts that will verify the submitted data from the spy agency. The nation's top spy agency is embroiled in an escalating hacking scandal surrounding allegations of wiretapping citizens and meddling in elections. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Marking the occasion today of completing the launch of 17 innovation centers across the country, President Park Geun-hye invited business leaders involved in the move to the presidential office. There, she sought their continued interest and cooperation. Our Chi Yoo-sun tells us more.
Celebrating the completion of the establishment of 17 creative economy innovation centers around the country, President Park said conglomerates that partner with the centers should consider the initiative as means of securing a sustainable growth engine on top of fulfilling their social responsibilities. A central part of President Park's creative economy drive, each innovation center has teamed up with a conglomerate to foster startups and upgrade specialized industries in different regions to ultimately create jobs and help the Korean economy leap forward.
혁신센터가 지역 주민들이 개개인의 능력과 끼를 발휘해서 창업을 할 수 있도록 모든 정보와 서비스가 집적되는 지역 창업 생태계의 구심점이 되어야 합니다.
Referring to a disconnect between specialized job seekers and localized small to mid-sized businesses, the president said the innovation center should collaborate with universities or research institutes to better match them up. She also urged the conglomerates to offer various programs to foster talent and to actively make new hires. As for the coexistence and prosperity of conglomerates and SMEs, the president said the Korean economy will be able to overcome challenges when startups and SMEs receiving conglomerate support begin giving back through their innovations. On the corporate side, the head of the Federation of Korean Industries vowed to help the country's young people find high-quality jobs by supporting startups and SMEs and fostering specialized industries in collaboration with innovation centers and local businesses. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
Though in the past, the idea of innovation centers has been criticized for its vagueness, but progress has definitely been made since their launch. And our Hwang Ji-hye tells us what the centers have achieved so far and what they're looking to achieve in the future.
The pace may be slow, but the momentum is growing. Over 5,000 potential startups have received advice from these innovation centers. That's more than sixfold from the end of last year. Those interested in launching their businesses are now actively attending seminars run by these centers, and those that have already opened their businesses benefit from the government funding, amounting to $140 million per center. In less than a year, the centers have successfully nurtured a handful of startups. Gyeonggi-do Province Center, for example, sent 3 startups to Orange Fab International Demo Day held in Paris in June, an event organized by Startup Accelerator there, and now 5 startups set up their booth at the Mobile World Congress held in Shanghai earlier this month. SK, in charge of running the Daejeon Center, has successfully fostered 10 startups that graduate from its program on Thursday. These startups, on average, leverage their revenue up to $1.5 million over the past 10 months, up nearly 6-fold since participating in Daejeon Center's program. The competition for inclusion in the center's Startup Foster program now stands at nearly 30-1. As for upcoming plans, the government will launch an English portal for innovation centers to match domestic startups with foreign investors and set up a national database for the startups. Seoul will also hold a Creative Economy Innovation Festival at the end of next month. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Let's turn now to a subject that once flooded the airwaves. Let's turn to our sights to the MERS situation here in Korea. With signs of the viral outbreak abating, the Korean government is expected to declare a de facto ending to the deadly virus. Our Park Ji-hye has the details.
With no new MERS patients reported for 19 straight days, local media outlets here in Korea reported Friday, quoting sources from the Prime Minister's office and the Health Ministry, that the Korean government will declare a de facto ending to the MERS outbreak early next week. Prime Minister Hwang Ji-hye, scheduled to chair a pan-government meeting next Monday regarding the MERS outbreak, is expected to deliver the message that the public can go back to their daily lives without further worry of the virus. The move follows a statement from the nation's health authority on Friday that only 1 person remains under quarantine and will be released next Monday. Currently, 12 patients are being treated, with 11 of them already testing negative for the virus more than twice, which leaves only 1 patient under treatment left to be tested. The World Health Organization recommends governments declare an official end to the virus outbreak 28 days after the final patient's negative test results, which is twice the duration of the deadly virus's incubation period. Although the Korean government will comply, it is expected to declare its own de facto ending to the outbreak early next week to ease public fear and stimulate the economy, already hard hit due to the virus. During the past 2 months, since the confirmation of Korea's first MERS patient in late May, 36 people have been killed and 186 infected. The disease's fatality rate in Korea stands at 19.4%, with more than 16,000 people quarantined during the outbreak. Park Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Japan's Mitsubishi Materials has extended apology for wartime slave labor to Americans as well as Chinese. Now, it's even planning to do so to British, Dutch, and Australian victims, but not Koreans. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
Mitsubishi Materials will compensate Chinese people over its use of forced labor during World War II. Tokyo-based Kyodo News Agency reports that the Japanese construction company will officially apologize and offer $60 million in total to the over 3,700 victims. This marks the first time a Japanese firm has agreed to apologize and pay compensation to Chinese war victims. They were part of some 39,000 people who were brought to Japan from China against their will between 1943 and 1945 to work at coal mines and construction sites. Sources say Mitsubishi will express deep remorse and offer sincere apologies to the victims. The firm will also spend $800,000 building a monument and $1.6 million to search for missing victims. Last week, Mitsubishi Materials apologized for using American POWs as slave laborers during the war. But the Japanese builder has yet to extend the same apology and compensation to Korean workers conscripted into forced labor. More than 37,000 Koreans are estimated to have been subject to forced labor during Japan's colonial rule of the Korean peninsula in the first half of the 20th century. Mitsubishi claims the situation is different because Koreans were technically Japanese citizens ordered to work under Tokyo's colonial rule at the time. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
Now shifting gears, the U.S. has released its initial review of how an Army lab in Utah sent 5 samples of anthrax to facilities around the world, including an airbase in Korea. Still, it did not identify a root cause for the delivery blunder. Our Kim Ji-yeon has the details on this and how Korea reacted.
The U.S. Pentagon blamed institutional and procedural failures at a Utah military lab for the release of live anthrax sample spores earlier this year. Deputy Defense Secretary Bob Work said Thursday that its review found no criminal or malicious intent behind the shipments from the Dugway Proving Ground military lab, but added that the lab's testing rate to ensure the virus had been inactivated was low, making the system prone to error.
And there was a very short period of time between the time Dugway irradiated the sample and declared it dead, and then the viability test to conclude that it was.
Work said live anthrax samples were sent from Dugway to 86 government and private labs facilities in the U.S. and 7 other countries, including an airbase in Korea. In response, Korea's defense ministry says it will launch an investigation through Korea-U.S. Joint Working Group formed earlier this month to figure out how live anthrax could have been shipped to its U.S. Forces Korea Osan airbase. The ministry says the group will focus on how the samples were cleared and whether they were properly processed, and also to find out if they've been shipped to the country in the past. The ministry says it's considering pushing for stronger measures regarding notification from the U.S. before it ships live and inactivated anthrax into Korea. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Let's turn to other stories now. It's a known fact that the prices of goods and services rise over time depending on supply, demand, and of course, inflation. With Liberation Day not too far away here in Korea, one question tossed is how have things changed for consumers in South Korea since the country's liberation from Japanese colonial rule in 1945? Well, our Kim Min-ji takes a closer look.
Back then, 40 kilos of Korea's staple food rice cost 0.351, a fraction of a cent. The price rose to about $10 in the mid-1970s and $50 by the 90s. Today, that same 40 kilos goes for about $70. A packet of ramyeon noodles, a favorite Korean snack, was priced at 10 won in 1963, but has since jumped 76-fold to less than $1 now. And what about entertainment? Koreans would have paid less than 2 won for a movie ticket 60 years ago, whereas they're shelling out about $10 now. TV license fees, the price households pay to have a TV, have also increased 25-fold to about $2. Now, to get around, Seoulites in the 1950s paid just 2 won for the bus. Since then, the price has gone up to 1,300 won. Maybe that's because petroleum prices have also jumped nearly 420-fold. The price variations have changed in response to supply and demand and have also been influenced by the quantity of substitute products the country imports and the price fluctuations in that country. Despite the steady increase over the years, Korea's consumer prices have not risen in recent months. They've been below the 1% mark, far below the government's target of 2.5%. But how do consumers feel?
If I spent about $30 on my groceries last year, I'm paying about $40 for the same amount this year.
Now I have to really pay attention to the prices. I tend to compare the prices of similar foods and buy the cheaper ones. Overall, prices have gone up, especially for processed food.
Experts say this is because the prices for products that consumers tend to buy regularly have risen, even though consumer prices have generally been low.
The government needs to manage the prices of products that people buy a lot, such as produce, by securing a greater supply or increasing imports when there's a shortage. They should also not increase public utility fees all at once, so that consumers don't feel it.
That task is something of a double-edged sword for the government, as it will have to limit the blow felt by consumers to encourage spending, but at the same time reach its inflation target for economic growth. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
When the Korean War broke out 65 years ago, various UN member nations did not hesitate to dispatch medical and military personnel to come to South Korea's aid. Though decades have passed since the armistice agreement was signed, South Korea has not forgotten the sacrifices of its global neighbors. Our Connie Kim got to meet up with the descendants of some of these international heroes.
The bloody war between the two Koreas broke out when North Korean forces invaded South Korea in the summer of 1950. After 3 devastating years of war, U.S.-led UN Command and the North Korean-Chinese coalition agreed to an armistice in 1953, bringing the Korean War to an end. Nearly 2 million personnel from 21 UN member nations took part in the Korean War. 62 years may have passed since the armistice agreement was signed, but Korea will never forget their efforts and their sacrifices. The Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs has invited more than 100 descendants of the Korean War veterans from the 17 UN member nations that were dispatched during the war in commemoration of the anniversary of the Armistice Agreement on July 27th. While paying tribute to the fallen heroes at the Seoul National Cemetery, some students said it was surreal to be in the country their grandfathers had fought for and contributed to building.
When my grandpa fought in the war, he was my age, 21, so to be here about the same age as he was when he was here fighting, it's a great experience to learn about what he went through.
Just being here has made it just so much more real and personal, and I feel a lot more connected to all the stories and all the memories that he's told me.
The group of students on this 7-day trip has been appointed peace ambassadors. They'll be visiting significant places in Korea, such as the demilitarized zone that show the reality of a still divided Korea and experience Korean culture. Canadian Korean War veteran John Bishop, also returning to the land where he fought at 19, says he hopes these students acquire as much knowledge about the country as possible to carry on the legacy for future generations.
I think they should make every effort to see all of Korea, visit a place such as here, the museum, and understand the history of Korea better. It's a very long and difficult task to really learn all the things.
Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And for our top international news headlines, let's turn to our Lee Sun-ho at the News Center.
Another shooting incident was reported in the U.S. Japan's Nikkei purchases the Financial Times, and NASA discovers an Earth-like planet.
But first, let's start with a tragic story, the shooting rampage in the U.S. Sun-ho.
Yes, a 58-year-old man opened fire in a crowded movie theater in the state of Louisiana on Thursday evening, local time, killing 2 people and injuring others. The tragic incident occurred at Grand Theater in Lafayette, adding to the list of mass shootings in the U.S. in recent months. Police officers arrived quickly at the scene and swarmed the cinema building, entering the building.
When those officers made entry, according to some of the people we spoke to, it looks like he spotted the officers coming in, and he turned around and he went against the crowd and he fired a single gunshot, and that was
The police chief said 7 people were hurt in the attack, ranging from minor to critical injuries. Police said that they have not chosen to release the identity of the shooter, citing that it was still too early in the investigation. Just hours prior to the shooting, ironically, President Obama admitted in an interview his failure to pass common-sense gun safety laws as his greatest frustration as president. And turning to business news, the Financial Times was bought out by Japanese giant Nikkei from its previous owner, Pearson, for $1.3 billion. This marks the biggest acquisition deal by a Japanese media company, bringing two leading news operations from Europe and Asia together. It was previously reported that the UK-based Pearson was intent on selling the company, as it was moving more into the education sector. Analysts say that the purchase will bring no extreme makeovers to the Financial Times, as they are not needed just yet.
Like all news organisations, it's slimmed down quite considerably over the last few years, and that paywall continues to provide the steady income it needs. I don't think anyone's looking to make radical changes just yet. It fits what it does very, very well, and it's a desire, I think, from any new owner not to change that current policy.
In a statement, Pearson said the time was right for the Financial Times to stand out from its rivals and be plugged into a global digital news organization. The British company had owned the business daily for nearly 60 years. And turning to the exciting world of space exploration, the hits keep on coming as NASA scientists may have now discovered another planet that just might be similar to ours. Our Son Jung-in has more.
With the planet-hunting Kepler telescope, scientists at NASA have discovered a planet that is believed to be the closest match to Earth found so far. The planet, known as Kepler 452b, is located in a solar system that is 1,400 light-years from our own in the constellation Cygnus. It is the first Earth-sized planet to date, orbiting the so-called habitable zone, or the area around the G2-type star where liquid water can pool on the planet's surface.
But today we're announcing the closest twin, so to speak, to Earth 2, or the Earth 2.0 that we found so far in the data set.
What is remarkable is that it orbits at about the same distance as Earth's orbit from the Sun, taking 385 days to circle around its home star that is similar but older and brighter than our Sun. While its mass and composition have yet to be determined, previous research on planets of similar size suggests that it may be rocky. As for its age and size, the planet is known to be about 6 billion years old, 1.5 billion years older than Earth, and 60% larger in diameter with twice the gravity.
So you and I would weigh twice as much as we do now, but only until we walked around for a few weeks and lost some serious pounds.
Along with Kepler 452b, scientists have discovered 12 other possible habitable exoplanets, a step closer on the journey to finding another Earth. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
And that does it for your international news today. I'll see you right back here on Monday.
It rained quite heavily in Seoul and the surrounding areas throughout the day, and the capital city received 42 millimeters of rainfall, which helped ease the drought. But more rain is expected for tomorrow, with up to 70 millimeters of rainfall here in the capital. And as for the monsoon season, it seems like it has come to an end today for the southern regions. Sunny Saturday with high UV levels will dominate the forecast, with temperature readings hovering above 30 degrees Celsius. But in the meantime, people in the capital area will have to wait till Sunday to see some sun, which will mean that temperatures will spike as well. And as for tomorrow's temperature readings, the daytime high here in Seoul and Daegu will hike up to 28 and 33, while Gwangju and Busan top out at 32 and 29 respectively. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 32 and 33 tomorrow afternoon. But Sunday is shaping up to be a rainy one for Jeju Island, with Typhoon Halola having a bit of an impact on the island and Busan, as well as the eastern coastal regions until next Monday. Well, that's all for the weather. Good night.
looks like some light drizzle adds to the romantic ambience in the Bukchon Hanok village. Maybe we should visit there someday for the weekends if you're in
have
Korea.
visited. It's a beautiful, beautiful place here in Korea that foreigners should visit.
Definitely. Well, that brings us to the end of our newscast for this week. Thank you so much for staying with us.
We'll be back next week, same time. Goodbye for now.